You really should wipe down the stovetop after every meal. Grease builds up, you know. It's not healthy for the baby. She said it the moment she walked into my kitchen. Not hello, not good morning. Just that. And my daughter was 4 months old, screaming in the bassinet 6 feet away, and I hadn't slept more than 90 minutes at a stretch in 2 weeks. It was 7:52 a.m. on a Tuesday in February. The kind of February that makes you question why anyone chose to settle in Ontario. The roads outside were gray slush. The sky was the color of old dishwater, and my mother-in-law had her own key to my front door. My name is not important. What matters is this. I am 31 years old. I work as a project coordinator for a construction firm in Kitchener, and I had just returned from 12 weeks of maternity leave to part-time hours. My husband, we'd been together 7 years, married for 2, travels for work. Not constantly, but enough. Enough that his mother had decided, sometime around my 3rd trimester, that her presence in our home was a form of support. It wasn't. She never announced herself. That was the thing. She had a key, because my husband gave it to her during a snowstorm in November, when I was 38 weeks pregnant and he was in Calgary for 4 days. He said it was practical. She said she just wanted to be nearby in case I needed anything. I said okay, because what was I supposed to say? I was enormous and exhausted, and the woman had just driven 40 minutes from her condo in Cambridge to drop off a lasagna. You don't say no to that. Not then. But the lasagna was a Trojan horse. After the baby came, the visits started. First, it was twice a week. Then it was every other day. Then one morning, I woke up at 6:45, shuffled into the kitchen to make coffee with my daughter strapped to my chest. And my mother-in-law was already sitting at my kitchen table, reading a flyer from No Frills. She had let herself in with her key. She didn't look up when I came in. She just said, "I thought you'd be up by now." The baby was crying. I heard it from outside. The baby was crying because that's what babies do. And I had been the one settling her, which is why I was standing in my own kitchen at 6:45, in a nursing bra and socks that didn't match, holding my daughter against my chest while my mother-in-law read about a sale on frozen peas. I told myself it was fine. She meant well. She came from a generation where mothers helped. My husband had grown up with her popping by his grandmother's place, unannounced. Everyone at the table, doors never locked. Different time, different culture, different house. But I told myself to be patient. That patience cost me more than I want to admit. The comments started small. The stovetop. The laundry she'd fold, and then refold with a very specific look on her face, as if my method of folding onesies was a moral failing. She'd ask if I was eating enough, and then, in the same breath, glance at the empty chip bag on the counter, with an expression that said more than words. She told me once, very gently, that breastfeeding stress could affect milk supply and that some mothers find it helpful to have a more structured routine. I had a routine. It just didn't match hers. What I didn't know yet was that she was documenting it. My husband mentioned it casually one evening in March. He said his mother had texted him, just to keep him in the loop, a photo of our daughter in the bouncer while I was on a work call in the other room. She had captioned it, "She's been in here a while. Baby looks a little fussed." He said he'd told her it was fine, that I was working, but he also said, and this is the part that stayed with me, "She's just worried. Maybe you could include her a bit more. Include her in my home." That she was already uninvited, photographing my child. I went very quiet after that, not the peaceful kind. The next one was worse. A week later, he mentioned that his mother had said she was concerned I seemed overwhelmed. That maybe we should look into getting a postpartum doula. Someone to come in and help with the housekeeping. I want to be clear. I had already seen a registered midwife, attended a community breastfeeding clinic, and had a postpartum check-in with my OB. I was not unraveling. I was tired. There is a difference. But his mother had decided there wasn't. It escalated slowly, and then all at once. My husband's family has a big Easter dinner every year. His parents, his brother and sister-in-law, a couple of aunts, some cousins, usually around 16 people rotating between houses. That year it was at ours. My suggestion, which I now understand, was a mistake. I spent 4 days preparing. I made a glazed ham, 2 salads, roasted vegetables, a tray of butter tarts. I cleaned the house from top to bottom. I bought extra folding chairs. I put together a little basket of spring things for the table. It sounds small, but it took thought. And I was still running on interrupted sleep and half portions of coffee because I was nursing. She arrived an hour before everyone else. White blazer. That particular smile. The one that sits on the face but doesn't come from anywhere real. She walked through the front door, looked at the table I had set, and said, "Oh, I thought we'd decided on a buffet style." We had not decided anything. She had mentioned once that she preferred buffets. I had not agreed to anything. I said, "I thought a sit-down would be nicer with the baby here." She said, "Of course," and went to find my husband. 20 minutes later, he came into the kitchen and said quietly that maybe we could move things around a bit, make it easier for people to serve themselves. I said nothing. I moved the food to the counter. The dinner went well, I thought. The ham was good. My daughter slept through most of it, which felt like a small miracle. But halfway through dessert, butter tarts, a pot of coffee, the table a little loud and warm the way family tables get. My mother-in-law tapped her wine glass with a spoon. She stood up. She said she just wanted to say something, because family was so important and she knew everyone felt the same way. I felt my stomach drop before the words came. She reached into her purse and put 3 printed photographs on the table. My kitchen counter, cluttered from meal prep. My daughter's change table with a stack of unfolded diapers. The living room floor with a play mat and several burp cloths draped over the couch. She said, "I've been a little concerned. New parenthood is hard. We all know that. And I just think it's worth checking in as a family about whether there's more support we can offer." The room went very quiet. My sister-in-law, my husband's brother's wife, looked at me from across the table. She didn't say anything. She didn't have to. I could see her doing the math, same as I was. This wasn't concern. This was a presentation. My husband looked at the photos. He looked at his mother. He said, "Mom, this probably isn't the..." She kept going. She said that she'd done some reading, that there were resources available, that she'd even spoken to someone at a family services office in Cambridge. Just to understand options, she said, just to understand what support looks like. A family services office. She had called a family services office about my home, about my child. The table was silent. One of the aunts cleared her throat. A cousin looked at her phone. I did not cry. I did not raise my voice. I excused myself, walked to the bathroom, locked the door, and stood at the sink for a long time. The water ran cold over my wrists. I looked at my face in the mirror. She wanted a reaction she could point to later. I didn't give her one. When I came back out, I thanked everyone for coming. I was warm. I offered more coffee. I helped clear the table. And when the last person left and my husband started to say something and I held up one hand, just one hand, quietly, he stopped. I put our daughter to bed. Then I sat at the kitchen table alone, and I started writing things down. Dates, times, what she said, what she did, what photos she took, and when I had noticed her phone out. I went back through my own phone and found messages my husband had forwarded without realizing how much they revealed. I found the text thread where she had been sending him photos of our home since November. 41 photos. 41. The next morning, I made 2 phone calls. The first was to a family lawyer in Waterloo. I didn't know if I needed one. I just wanted to understand what a family services inquiry actually meant, and what rights I had if someone tried to use it against me. The lawyer was calm, clear, and very helpful. She told me that a general inquiry to a family services office, with no file opened and no investigation initiated, meant very little on its own, but she also told me to document everything. I was already doing that. The second call was to my daughter's pediatrician. I asked to schedule a wellness visit, and I asked the doctor, in writing, to note in the file that I had proactively requested a developmental check-in, and that I had questions about sleep schedules, feeding patterns, and postpartum recovery. I wanted a paper trail that I had initiated, not one that had been built around me. Then I called a locksmith. I had the locks changed that afternoon, not dramatically, not while anyone was watching. I scheduled it like a plumbing appointment, between noon and 2, and when the locksmith left, I stood at the door and turned the new key in the new lock 3 times just to feel it. I also installed a video doorbell and 2 small cameras, one in the front entryway, one in the living room. I didn't hide them. They were right there, visible, mounted at normal height. I set up the smart lock app on my phone. I did not tell my mother-in-law. I did not tell my husband yet. I called her 2 days later. Friendly voice. Warm tone. I said I'd been thinking about what she said at Easter, about wanting to support us more, and that I would love for her to come by Thursday morning, just the 2 of us, to talk. She paused. Then she said, "Of course, I'll bring muffins." Thursday, 9:17 a.m. I watched on my phone as her car pulled into the driveway. I watched her walk up the front path. I watched her reach into her bag, pull out her key, and put it in the lock. Beeped. Access denied. A pause. Then the doorbell. I opened the door. I smiled. I said, "Oh, I should have mentioned, I updated the locks last week. Come in." Her eyes moved to the camera above the doorframe, then to the one in the entryway. She stepped inside. She looked around the living room. Clean, organized. My daughter on a playmat with a set of stacking rings, happy and present. I made tea. I sat across from her at the kitchen table and I let her talk first. She said she was glad we were doing this, that she hoped there were no hard feelings, that she only ever wanted what was best for her granddaughter. I said, "I know. That's actually what I wanted to talk to you about." I put a folder on the table. Inside, my daughter's growth charts from every check-in since birth. Her vaccination record, up to date. A note from the pediatrician following our wellness visit confirming healthy development, excellent weight gain, and a stable, attentive home environment. A letter from my therapist. I had been seeing one voluntarily since 6 weeks postpartum, something I was proud of. Confirming consistent attendance and no concerns. My mother-in-law looked at the folder without touching it. I said, "Since we're all interested in documentation." Something shifted in her face. I opened my laptop. The living room TV connected. On the screen, footage from the entryway camera, date stamped, time stamped. Her walking in with her key on a Tuesday morning while I was on a work call. Her moving things in the kitchen, reorganizing the cupboard above the stove, which I had not asked her to do. Her standing in my daughter's room, phone out, taking photos, while the baby was in the crib. She said, "You recorded me. The cameras are visible. I mentioned updating the locks. I didn't hide anything." She said, "In my son's home." "In my home," I said, quietly. "No heat in it, just a fact." I gave her a moment. Then I slid one more piece of paper across the table. It was a printout of a text message. One she had sent to her sister, not my husband, her sister, 2 months ago. I had found it because my husband's phone had been linked to a shared cloud backup that neither of us had properly reviewed in years, and her message had come through as a forwarded contact notification. I am not proud of how I found it, but I found it. The message said, "I've been in touch with family services just to have it on record. If things don't improve, I think we may need to look at what's in Ivy's best interest long term." Ivy. My daughter's name. Best interest, long term. She had been building a case, not just worrying, not just overstepping, building an actual case, with documentation, with external contacts, with the intention of using my child as a lever. My mother-in-law looked at the paper for a long time. Then she said very quietly, "I was protecting her," I said, "from her mother." She didn't answer. The front door opened. My husband came in. I had asked him to come home by 10, Told him there was something important we needed to discuss as a family. He walked into the kitchen and stopped. He looked at the TV screen. He looked at the folder on the table. He looked at his mother. She started to say something. She said she had only been trying to help, that she had been worried, that I had seemed overwhelmed and she didn't know what else to do. My husband sat down. He read the text message. He read it twice. Then he said, "Mom, you contacted Family Services," she said, "just to understand. You contacted Family Services about my wife, about our daughter." The room was very still. She tried one more time. She said she had been there for him his whole life, that she knew what a good home looked like, that she had raised him, hadn't she? And didn't that count for something? He said, "Yes. And I'm asking you to trust that you raised me well enough to do this myself." That was the moment. That quiet, careful sentence. I hadn't expected it to land the way it did. She looked at him like she was seeing something she didn't recognize. I spoke last. I said, "I want you to be part of Ivy's life. I mean that. But I need you to understand that what you did, the photos, the texts, the inquiry, that was not support, that was preparation. And it cannot happen again." I slid a final envelope across the table. Inside was a written record of every unauthorized entry into our home, pulled from the smart lock log and the camera timestamps, along with a short letter I had drafted with the help of my lawyer, outlining the boundaries going forward. Scheduled visits, confirmed in advance. No key, no drop-ins, no third-party contacts regarding our family without our knowledge. I said, "If those boundaries are respected, we move forward. If they're not, I will pursue this formally." She picked up her purse. She didn't take the muffins. At the door, she turned and said, "You've changed." I said, "Yes." She left. My husband and I sat at the kitchen table for a while after. He was quiet for a long time. Then he said he was sorry. Not with explanation, not with qualification. Just sorry. And he meant it. It took another 3 weeks before his mother called to apologize. The apologies was not perfect. It was partial, a little hedged, the way apologies are when someone hasn't fully understood what they did wrong, but knows they need to say something. I accepted it anyway, because I wasn't interested in punishment. I was interested in a life that felt like mine. She visits now every second Sunday. She texts first. She brings muffins, blueberry, always from the same bakery in Cambridge. And she sits on the floor with Ivy and stacks the rings and makes the sounds grandmothers make. The soft, ridiculous, wonderful sounds that babies respond to like sunlight. She hasn't asked about the cameras. She hasn't tried the door with a key she no longer has. Some days I wonder what would have happened if I had kept being patient, kept absorbing it, kept telling myself she meant well. I think I know the answer. I think she would have kept building her file, slow and careful, until she had enough to stand behind. Instead, I built one first. The house feels different now, not quieter, Ivy makes sure of that. But mine. Finally, fully mine.